The massive Zephyrian warships floated in perfect formation across the Kepler sector, like deadly metal giants waiting to strike. Admiral Krextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the military exercise with satisfaction. His third fleet was the pride of the Empire, with over 200 vessels including the new Devastator-class dreadnoughts that could crack moons with their main weapons. Today's exercise was meant to send a clear message to any rebellious colonies on the rim worlds. Submit to the Empire or face complete destruction. The Admiral's scaled reptilian face showed pleasure as he watched his ships practice their attack formations. The Empire had ruled most of known space for over 3 centuries, and Krextar intended to keep it that way. These exercises were not just training, but a show of force that would remind everyone why the Zephyrian Empire remained supreme. His communication officer reported that dozens of colonies were monitoring their transmissions, and the fear in those intercepted messages brought him great joy. Suddenly, the bridge fell silent as the sensor operator called out an anomaly. A single ship had emerged from hyperspace at the very edge of the system, completely unannounced and without permission. Krextar turned his massive frame toward the main display screen where the unknown vessel appeared as a small blip among his mighty fleet. The ship looked strange and primitive with angular hull plating that seemed crude compared to the smooth, elegant lines of Imperial warships. Its energy signature was weak, and the weapon mounts visible on its hull appeared almost ancient by modern standards. The unknown vessel transmitted an identification signal that made several bridge officers laugh out loud. It called itself the UHS Defiance and claimed to be a human warship requesting safe passage through Imperial space. Humans were one of the younger species in the galaxy and had been relegated to the outer rim after several failed attempts to establish themselves among the major powers. Most Imperial citizens considered them barely worthy of notice with their short lifespans and primitive technology that lagged centuries behind true galactic civilization. Admiral Krextar felt his mood improve even further as he realized this unexpected visitor would provide the perfect opportunity to demonstrate Imperial might. A single human ship stumbling into his fleet exercise was like a gift from the gods themselves. He could make an example of these upstart humans while his officers watched and learn why no one challenges the Empire without consequences. The timing could not have been more perfect for teaching both his own people and any watching colonies about the price of defiance. The Admiral opened a communication channel to the human vessel and spoke in his most commanding voice. He ordered the Defiance to surrender immediately for inspection and prepare to be boarded by Imperial security forces. The response from the human ship came back within moments, but it was not what anyone on the bridge expected to hear. Captain Alex Morgan of the UHS Defiance politely but firmly refused the surrender demand and cited human territorial sovereignty as grounds for his refusal. The bridge officers looked at each other in complete disbelief before several of them began laughing again. A single human ship was actually defying the entire Third Fleet and claiming territorial rights in Imperial space. Krextar found their audacity both amusing and insulting. These humans clearly did not understand the reality of their situation or the overwhelming power they faced. He would have to educate them about the natural order of things in the galaxy. The Admiral decided to escalate the situation gradually to maximize the lesson for everyone watching. He ordered 3 of his heavy cruisers to move into intercept positions around the human vessel. Each cruiser was nearly 3 times the size of the Defiance and carried enough firepower to level a small city. Surely the humans would come to their senses when faced with such overwhelming odds and surrender before any actual violence became necessary, but the human ship did something completely unexpected in response to the approaching Imperial vessels. Instead of fleeing at maximum speed or powering up their weapons for a hopeless last stand, the Defiance simply held its position in space. The vessel remained completely still and calm, as if 3 massive warships moving to surround it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Captain Morgan transmitted another message stating that his ship would defend itself if attacked, but preferred a peaceful resolution to the current situation. Admiral Krextar felt the first stirrings of unease as he studied the tactical display. Something about the humans' confidence did not match their apparent technological inferiority. No rational captain would remain this calm when facing impossible odds unless they knew something their enemies did not. The Defiance's energy readings were still minimal and its weapons remained powered down, but there was something in the way it held position that suggested hidden strength. The Imperial cruisers completed their encirclement of the human vessel and requested final instructions from the flagship. Kregstar stared at the Defiance on his screen and tried to understand what made these humans so confident. Their ship looked like it had been built in some backwater shipyard using outdated technology and spare parts. The hull showed signs of modification and repair that suggested a long service life among the outer colonies. Yet something about the vessel's stance suggested it was far more dangerous than it appeared. The Admiral made his decision and opened another channel to Captain Morgan. He gave the humans one final ultimatum to surrender or face the consequences of defying Imperial authority. The response came back immediately in the same calm, professional tone that had marked all previous communications from the Defiance. Captain Morgan stated that his ship would not surrender but was willing to discuss alternative solutions to their current standoff that might satisfy both parties' interests. Kregstar's patience finally ran out as he realized the humans were actually trying to negotiate with him as equals. No one negotiated with the Zephyrian Empire because the Empire did not make deals with inferior species. He ordered his cruisers to prepare for attack and gave Captain Morgan 30 seconds to reconsider his position. The human response was to begin broadcasting on all Imperial frequencies, announcing that they were about to demonstrate why underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The bridge fell silent as everyone waited to see what one small human ship could possibly do against the might of the Imperial Third Fleet. Captain Alex Morgan stood calmly on the bridge of the UHS Defiance as Imperial cruisers moved into attack positions around his ship. His crew worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency that came from years of operating in dangerous space where any mistake could mean death. Commander Lisa Barrett studied the tactical display and called out position updates, while Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez monitored the ship's hybrid systems from his station. Dr. Carol Hayes continued analyzing the Imperial communication frequencies they had been monitoring for weeks. The human crew had not stumbled into this confrontation by accident. They had been tracking the Imperial Third Fleet for days and knew all about the military exercises designed to intimidate rebellious colonies. Dr. Hayes had intercepted classified transmissions revealing something far more sinister than simple saber rattling. The Empire was planning Operation Cleansing Fire, which would systematically eliminate every independent civilization within 6 months. Dozens of worlds would be enslaved or destroyed to prevent any future challenges to Imperial authority. Morgan knew his single ship was vastly outnumbered by the massive Imperial fleet, but he also knew something Admiral Kregstar did not. Human technology had evolved in completely unexpected directions during their isolation on the galactic rim. While alien civilizations focused on building bigger ships with more powerful weapons, humans had developed efficiency and adaptability. Their vessels could reconfigure systems on the fly and adapt to threats in ways that no other species had imagined possible. Chief Engineer Rodriguez had spent decades perfecting the hybrid technology that gave human ships their edge. The Defiance looked crude from the outside, but its internal systems were marvels of adaptive engineering. The armor could harden under fire and redistribute damage across the entire hull. The weapon systems learned from each engagement and modified their output to counter specific enemy defenses. Most importantly, the ship's phase technology allowed it to slip, partially out of normal space, making conventional weapons nearly useless against it. Commander Barrett reported that the Imperial cruisers had completed their encirclement and were powering up their weapon systems. Morgan considered his options carefully, knowing that whatever happened next would affect not just his crew, but potentially every human colony in known space. If he backed down now, the Empire would see humanity as weak and easy prey. If he fought and lost, the result would be the same. But if he could demonstrate that humans were not the primitive species everyone believed them to be, it might change everything. The captain made his decision and opened a communication channel to Admiral Kregstar. Instead of surrendering or making threats, Morgan proposed something that caught the entire Imperial fleet off guard. He suggested single combat between ships to settle their dispute according to ancient galactic traditions. If the Defiance won, the Empire would grant safe passage to all human vessels in this sector for 1 full year. If the humans lost, they would consider joining the Empire as a client species under Imperial protection. The proposal was so unexpected that several minutes passed before Admiral Krextar responded. When his laughter finally came through the communication system, it was loud enough to be heard throughout the Defiance bridge. The idea of a single human ship challenging an Imperial vessel in formal combat struck the Admiral as the most amusing thing he had heard in years. He accepted the challenge immediately, seeing it as an easy way to demonstrate Imperial superiority while following the old traditions that still carried weight in galactic politics. Admiral Krextar selected the IES Domination as his champion for the coming duel. The heavy cruiser was one of his most powerful vessels, with enough firepower to destroy small asteroids and shields that could withstand direct hits from planetary defense systems. Captain Vexistar commanded the Domination and had never lost a ship-to-ship engagement in over 20 years of Imperial service. The vessel outmassed the human ship by more than 3-to-1 and carried weapons that should be able to vaporize the Defiance with a single coordinated salvo. As the two ships moved apart to begin their formal duel, Morgan addressed his crew over the internal communication system. He reminded them that they were not just fighting for their own lives, but for every human colony that had ever dreamed of freedom from alien domination. The outcome of this battle would determine whether humanity remained a footnote in galactic history or took its place among the great civilizations of known space. Every system had to work perfectly, and every crew member had to perform beyond their normal limits. Chief Rodriguez reported that all hybrid systems were online and operating at maximum efficiency. The phase generators were charged and ready to shift the ship partially out of normal space. The adaptive armor was configured to absorb and redistribute impact energy across the entire hull structure. Most importantly, the learning weapon systems had finished analyzing Imperial technology and were prepared to adapt their attacks in real time based on enemy responses. The Defiance was as ready as it would ever be for the fight of its life. Dr. Hayes monitored Imperial communications and reported that betting on the outcome was heavily favoring the Domination, with odds running nearly 50-to-1 against the human ship. The entire Imperial fleet was treating the coming battle as entertainment rather than a serious military engagement. Admiral Krextar had positioned his flagship for the best view of what he expected to be a very brief and decisive demonstration of Imperial superiority over human presumption. The formal combat zone was established, with both ships taking positions exactly 10,000 kilometers apart. Traditional galactic combat protocols required that engagement begin with long-range fire before closing to shorter distances, where maneuvering and tactics would become more important. Captain Vexistar of the Domination intended to end the fight quickly, with overwhelming firepower, before the human ship could even begin to close the distance between them. Morgan stood at his command station and watched the tactical display as the final preparations were completed. His crew was ready and his ship was performing flawlessly, but he knew the next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but the future of humanity itself. The signal came from Admiral Krextar's flagship, indicating that formal combat could begin at will. Captain Vextar immediately opened fire with every weapon the Domination possessed, sending brilliant streams of plasma energy racing across space toward the small human vessel that dared to challenge Imperial might. The massive plasma bolts from the IES Domination streaked across space like burning spears thrown by an angry god. Each bolt carried enough energy to melt through several meters of military-grade armor, and the coordinated salvo should have instantly vaporized any ship foolish enough to challenge Imperial might. Captain Vextar watched his weapons fire with satisfaction, knowing that the primitive human vessel would be nothing more than glowing debris within seconds. The entire Imperial fleet observed the engagement, expecting to witness the shortest formal combat in galactic history. But something impossible happened. As the plasma bolts reached the position where the UHS Defiance should have been completely destroyed, the human ship flickered like a mirage in desert heat and became partially transparent just as the Imperial weapons struck. The brilliant energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space, where solid matter should have been torn apart by overwhelming force. The Defiance rematerialized, an instant later completely undamaged, and began accelerating toward the much larger Imperial cruiser. Admiral Krextar stared at his display screen in complete disbelief as his sensors confirmed what his eyes refused to accept. The human ship had somehow shifted partially out of normal space, allowing the plasma bolts to pass through without causing any damage whatsoever. No known technology could accomplish such a feat, and yet the evidence was right there in front of him. The primitive vessel that should have been destroyed was not only intact, but actually moving to attack the Imperial cruiser that outmassed it by more than 3-1. Captain Vextar recovered from his shock quickly and ordered his gunners to continue firing at the approaching human vessel. The Domination's weapon systems tracked the Defiance and sent another coordinated salvo, racing across the diminishing distance between the two ships. But the human vessel repeated its impossible defensive maneuver, shifting just enough out of phase to allow the energy beams to pass through harmlessly. The crew of the Imperial cruiser watched in growing panic as their most powerful weapons proved completely useless against this strange defensive technology. The Defiance closed the distance with shocking speed, using its superior maneuverability to stay close to the Domination where the larger ship's main weapons could not track effectively. Captain Morgan had studied Imperial tactics for years and knew that their vessels were designed for long-range combat where raw firepower could decide battles before enemy ships could close to shorter ranges. By staying close to the Imperial cruiser, the human ship negated most of the enemy's advantages while maximizing their own tactical flexibility. Commander Barrett coordinated the Defiance's own weapons as they began their attack on the Imperial vessel. The human ship's guns looked crude and outdated compared to the sleek energy weapons mounted on Zephyrian warships, but their true nature became apparent as soon as they opened fire. Each shot was different from the last as the adaptive weapon systems analyzed Imperial defenses and modified their output to counter specific shield frequencies and armor compositions. The learning algorithms built into human technology allowed them to become more effective. With every exchange, Captain Vextar ordered his ship to launch missiles at point-blank range, hoping that physical projectiles might succeed where energy weapons had failed. The Domination's missile tubes fired dozens of high-explosive warheads that should have overwhelmed any point defense system through sheer numbers. But the human ship's defensive capabilities proved just as revolutionary as their phase technology. Point defense systems evolved from centuries of dealing with space debris, and micrometeors swept the incoming missiles from space with devastating efficiency. The Defiance moved around the Imperial cruiser like a predator circling wounded prey. Human weapons struck with surgical precision, targeting specific systems rather than attempting to inflict maximum damage. Shield generators failed under the adaptive fire, as the learning weapons found the exact frequencies needed to penetrate Zephyrian defensive technology. Weapon mounts exploded as human guns targeted their power feeds and ammunition storage. Propulsion units sparked and died as precisely. Aimed shots severed control cables and fuel. Vice Admiral Kriegstar watched in growing horror as his heavy cruiser was systematically dismantled by a ship one-third its size. The humans were not trying to destroy the Domination outright, but were instead disabling it piece by piece with methodical precision. Every shot was calculated to cripple rather than kill, and it became obvious that the Defiance could have annihilated the Imperial vessel at any point, but chose restraint instead. The demonstration of superior technology, combined with tactical mercy, sent a clear message about human capabilities and intentions. The engagement continued for nearly 20 minutes as the human ship proved that their victory was not based on luck or a single technological advantage. Chief Rodriguez's hybrid systems performed flawlessly under combat conditions, while the adaptive armor distributed the few hits that managed to connect across the entire hull structure. Dr. Hayes monitored Imperial communications and reported that panic was spreading through the fleet as officers tried to understand how their most advanced warship was being defeated by primitive human technology. Captain Vextar finally accepted the inevitable and signaled his surrender. When his ship's main reactor began showing signs of instability from battle damage, the proud Imperial cruiser drifted powerless in space with its weapons destroyed and its engines offline but its crew alive and unharmed. Captain Morgan accepted the surrender graciously and ordered his medical team to assist with any Imperial casualties. The human ship moved away from the disabled cruiser and opened a communication channel to Admiral Kriegstar's flagship. Morgan's voice carried clearly across all Imperial communication frequencies as he reminded Admiral Kriegstar of their formal agreement. The Empire had witnessed the outcome of single combat, and according to ancient galactic traditions was bound to honor the terms. All human vessels would have safe passage through this sector for 1 full year, and the Empire would recognize human territorial sovereignty in the agreed-upon region. The captain then did something that shocked every Imperial officer, listening to the transmission. Instead of gloating over his victory, or making threats about future consequences, Captain Morgan offered to share human medical technology to help treat the wounded crew of the Domination. He explained that humanity had no desire for conquest or domination, but simply wanted to coexist peacefully with other galactic civilizations. The offer of aid to former enemies combined with the restraint shown during combat painted a picture of human character that was completely different from what Imperial propaganda had taught about primitive rimworld species. The broadcast ended with Morgan expressing hope that this demonstration might lead to better understanding between their peoples, rather than continued conflict that would benefit no one. News of the Imperial defeat spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace messages could carry official reports. Within hours, every civilized world knew that a single human ship had defeated one of the Empire's most powerful cruisers in formal combat. The story grew with each telling as beings who had lived under Imperial rule for generations suddenly saw proof that their oppressors were not invincible. Underground resistance movements that had operated in shadows for decades began planning more ambitious operations while subject species dared to hope for freedom they had not imagined possible. Admiral Krextar received immediate orders to return to the Imperial capital for emergency consultations with the High Command. His career was effectively over after suffering such a public humiliation, and he knew that other admirals would be studying the engagement recordings to understand how human technology had proven superior to Imperial weapons. The defeat of the Domination was not just a tactical loss, but a strategic disaster that undermined the foundation of Imperial power, which depended on absolute technological supremacy over subject species. Captain Morgan and the crew of the UHS Defiance did not immediately return to human space as everyone expected. Instead, they remained in the Kepler sector, analyzing the massive amount of intelligence Dr. Hayes had gathered during their monitoring of Imperial communications. The intercepted transmissions revealed the full scope of Operation Cleansing Fire, which would begin within 6 months and target not just human colonies, but dozens of other independent civilizations. The Empire planned to eliminate every potential threat to their authority in a coordinated campaign of conquest and genocide. The target list included species that most galactic citizens had never heard of, as well as some of the oldest civilizations in known space. The Kalari Republic with their crystal-based technology would be among the first to fall, followed by the Thraxan Collective, whose biological engineering capabilities posed a theoretical threat to Imperial genetic purity. Even ancient peoples, like the Nexus Union who had withdrawn from galactic politics centuries ago, were marked for elimination simply because their artificial intelligence networks operated outside Imperial control. Morgan made a decision that would define humanity's role in galactic politics for generations to come. Rather than fleeing to safety in human space, the Defiance began a covert mission to warn the targeted civilizations and coordinate a unified resistance against Imperial aggression. The captain understood that no single species could stand against the Empire alone, but a coordinated alliance might have enough combined strength to resist the coming storm. Humanity would not abandon other species to face Imperial genocide while hiding safely on the rim worlds. Their first contact was with the Kalari Republic, whose leaders initially refused to believe that the Empire would risk open war against established civilizations. The crystal cities of Kalari Prime had stood for millennia, and their energy manipulation technology was considered among the most advanced in the galaxy. Ambassador Chartel laughed when Commander Barrett presented evidence of Imperial plans, until Dr. Hayes showed him intercepted communications that included detailed invasion schedules and occupation protocols specifically designed for Kalari worlds. The meeting took place aboard a neutral trading station where diplomatic immunity protected all participants from Imperial retaliation. Morgan demonstrated human technology by allowing Kalari scientists to examine phase generators and adaptive weapon systems, while Barrett explained tactical concepts that had allowed one small ship to defeat a much larger Imperial vessel. The combination of superior technology and innovative strategy convinced the Kalari that humans were serious allies, rather than desperate refugees seeking protection from stronger powers. Within days, other species began arriving at the secret, meeting location as word spread through underground networks that someone was organizing resistance to Imperial expansion. The Thraxan delegation brought samples of their biological engineering, including self-repairing materials that could revolutionize ship construction. Representatives from the Nexus Union contributed artificial intelligence algorithms that could coordinate fleet movements across vast distances. Each species offered unique capabilities that complemented human adaptability and tactical innovation. Chief Rodriguez worked around the clock with alien engineers to develop hybrid technologies that combined the best aspects of different scientific approaches. Kalari energy manipulation merged with human phase technology to create defensive systems that were nearly impenetrable. Thraxan biological engineering enhanced human adaptive armor until it could literally heal itself during combat. Nexus artificial intelligence networks coordinated human tactical flexibility to achieve unprecedented levels of strategic coordination across multiple star systems. The alliance grew rapidly as species after species joined what became known as the Free Systems Coalition. Each new member brought unique strengths that made the whole organization more powerful than the sum of its individual parts. Ancient civilizations that had withdrawn from galactic politics emerged from isolation to share knowledge accumulated over millennia. Young aggressive species contributed energy and enthusiasm for the fight ahead. Even some Imperial client states began secretly supporting the coalition while maintaining their official loyalty to avoid immediate retaliation. Imperial intelligence soon detected increased activity among target species, but failed to understand the scope of the growing resistance movement. Admiral Krextar submitted reports warning that subject populations were becoming restless and recommended accelerating Operation Cleansing Fire before organized opposition could develop. The High Command agreed and moved the invasion timeline forward by several months, hoping to crush any resistance before it could become a serious threat to Imperial authority. Dr. Hayes intercepted the updated operational orders and warned coalition leaders that they had far less time to prepare than originally planned. The Empire would begin its campaign of conquest within 8 weeks rather than 6 months, which meant defensive preparations would have to be completed in record time. Morgan addressed the Coalition Council and reminded them that they were no longer fighting just for survival, but for the right of all species to determine their own destiny without Imperial interference. The Free Systems Coalition represented everything the Empire feared most about allowing subject species to develop independently. Unity between different civilizations created possibilities that no single culture could achieve alone, and challenged the fundamental Imperial belief that only through domination could galactic peace be maintained. As coalition fleets began moving into defensive positions, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether the galaxy's future belonged to tyranny or freedom. The Empire's greatest fear was about to become reality, as their victims united against them with determination forged by centuries of oppression and strengthened by hope that had seemed impossible just weeks before. The massive Imperial Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled territory, like a plague of metal locusts seeking to devour everything in their path. Admiral Krextar had been given one last chance to redeem his honor by leading Operation Cleansing Fire against the species that had humiliated him. Over 500 Imperial warships, including the dreaded Devastator class, dreadnoughts formed up in perfect attack formation, ready to sweep away human resistance and continue on to eliminate every other target on their list. But instead of finding scattered human colonies desperately trying to evacuate their populations, the Imperial fleet discovered something that should have been impossible. The Free Systems Coalition was waiting for them, with over 300 vessels representing dozens of different species united in common cause against Imperial tyranny. Kalari crystal ships gleamed like captured starlight, while Thraxan biovessels pulsed with organic energy. Nexus artificial intelligence drones moved in, perfect coordination alongside human warships that bristled with hybrid technology developed through unprecedented interspecies cooperation. Admiral Krextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief as sensor reports confirmed that every species on the target list had somehow learned about Operation Cleansing Fire and formed a military alliance. Worse yet, the coalition fleet was not positioned defensively, but had taken offensive formations suggesting they intended to attack rather than simply resist Imperial advances. The intelligence failure was staggering and meant that everything the High Command thought they knew about galactic politics was completely wrong. Captain Morgan stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, which had been designated as the coalition flagship due to humanity's role in organizing the resistance. The human ship had been upgraded with the best technology each member species could provide, and now represented the pinnacle of cooperative engineering. Chief Rodriguez monitored hybrid systems that combined phase technology with Kalari energy manipulation and Thraxan biological adaptation. Dr. Hayes coordinated communications through Nexus artificial intelligence networks that linked every coalition vessel in real time. The battle began when Imperial dreadnoughts opened fire at maximum range, hoping to destroy coalition ships before they could close to effective fighting distance. Massive plasma streams that could crack planets struck coalition defensive positions, only to be absorbed and redirected by hybrid shield systems that treated energy as a resource to be harvested rather than a force to be resisted. Kalari crystal matrices stored the incoming energy, while human phase technology allowed coalition ships to appear and disappear, like ghosts dancing between dimensions. The coalition response demonstrated everything the Empire had feared about allowing different species to cooperate freely. Human ships served as mobile command centers, coordinating attacks by vessels whose crews had never worked together before, but were linked through Nexus artificial intelligence networks that translated not just languages, but tactical concepts between radically different military doctrines. Thraxan bioships released clouds of adaptive nanites that overwhelmed Imperial point defenses, while Kalari energy projectors created barriers that protected advancing coalition forces. Imperial tactics that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries proved useless against coalition forces that adapted their strategies in real time. Human crews demonstrated their natural ability to improvise by developing new uses for alien technology during the battle itself. Commander Barrett coordinated attacks that used Kalari crystal resonance to amplify human weapons beyond their normal output, while Thraxan biological systems merged with human adaptive armor to create protection that literally evolved under fire. The turning point came when Admiral Krextar ordered his flagship, Emperor's Wrath, into close combat, hoping that the massive dreadnought's overwhelming firepower could break coalition coordination. The vessel was the pride of the Imperial fleet, with enough weapons to destroy entire star systems and armor, thick enough to withstand direct hits from stellar radiation. But Captain Morgan had been waiting for this moment and led a desperate assault using every technological advantage the coalition possessed. The Defiance phased directly through the dreadnought's shields, using hybrid technology that combined human phase generators with Kalari energy manipulation to create effects that no single species could achieve alone. The human ship materialized inside the Emperor's Wrath defensive perimeter and began systematically disabling critical systems, while Imperial crews struggled to understand how their enemy had bypassed every protection they possessed. Morgan led a boarding party through hull breaches created by precisely targeted weapons that used Thraxan biological acids guided by Nexus targeting algorithms. The human boarding party fought their way through Imperial corridors using equipment that adapted to enemy defenses faster than defenders could respond. Admiral Krextar made his last stand on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the most advanced technology the Empire could produce, but facing enemies whose capabilities exceeded anything Imperial science had imagined possible. When Morgan finally confronted the Admiral, he offered something that surprised everyone present, including his own crew. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender or executing the Admiral for war crimes, Captain Morgan offered Krextar a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The Empire could continue fighting a war they could not win while their ships were systematically destroyed by superior coalition technology, or they could help negotiate a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. The choice was between destruction and evolution, with humanity offering the same mercy they had shown during their first encounter months earlier. Admiral Krextar looked around his ruined bridge at the human soldiers who could have killed him but chose restraint, and finally understood what made these supposedly primitive beings so dangerous. They offered strength to the weak instead of exploiting weakness for personal gain. They built alliances instead of demanding submission. Most importantly, they fought for principles rather than conquest, which gave them a moral authority that pure military power could never provide. The admiral made his decision and ordered the Imperial fleet to stand down while he opened negotiations with coalition representatives. The Galactic Accords were signed, 6 months later establishing the free systems. Coalition is an equal power to the Zephyrian Empire and creating a new framework for interspecies relations based on mutual respect rather than domination. Humanity had gone from being dismissed as primitive rim-world barbarians to becoming the diplomatic heart of a democratic alliance that included some of the oldest and most advanced civilizations in known space. Captain Morgan addressed the Galactic Assembly and delivered a speech about the dangerous folly of underestimating any species' potential, while emphasizing that true strength came from unity rather than conquest. The Empire's greatest fear had become reality, as their former victims created something far more powerful than tyranny could ever achieve through cooperation and shared purpose that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come.